What's up, guys? I know you haven't seen my face in like 7 days. It's because I've been traveling, and then these finals that are coming up in a couple weeks got me messed up. Like, the teacher says that you can only have a paper full of notes, and so he has like 60 terms you have to remember. But then he says you have to choose, like, he chooses 10 terms randomly. So now you have to know every term. So I created a study guide. Nobody can read it but me. But then there's an essay template on there too, which it should not be that hard. But I got a 75 on my latest test, which I'm like, there's no way. So I went to the professor. And he says it was my sophistication points. And I remember back in U.S. history in high school, I used to fuck up on the sophistication points all the time. So I guess we'll learn from that, and we'll get a higher grade on it now. I've just had a lot of stuff going on. I've been traveling because of Easter, even though I don't really celebrate it. But I had me and my boys had a good time together. We had a couple of functions we did. But we're gonna get back in talking on here because I miss talking. This is my favorite thing to do as of right now. It's just to educate people and to start some type of conversation. And this is what I do. This is what I do. That was corny. But today we're talking about a Mikey Parenti lecture that I did some notes on and I watched the video a couple days ago and I did some notes on it. And the video is on the victimization of women. And I believe I already did. I already did a video on Women, Race, and Class by Angela Davis. It's on the same. It's on the same spectrum, but Parenti talks more about material history here, and that's what I'm going to get into. So Parenti, as you all know, Yale PhD, Democracy of the Few author. This video is like one of the most honest and systematic, clear-eyed analysis of what women actually face in society, and why that I've ever watched. Because the argument Parenti makes isn't just about women. It's about power. It's about class. It's about every system of domination in history has used the same playbook. And what I like about Parenti is he's kind of opened my eyes to a lot of things, to a lot of imperialism and capitalism and how it works today and how it still persists because of patterns. And history is just patterns, really, if you really think about it. And once you start to recognize those patterns, you start to recognize how the world works. But the first take is like, where does patriarchy actually come from? This is what separates him from most people talking about gender. He goes to the root of it, and he says it's not feelings or not psychology or not individual bad behavior. He goes to material history, even though patriarchy is psychology, feelings, and individual bad behavior. If you ever read Bell Hooks, she talks, understanding patriarchy, she talks a lot about the psychology of both men and women, how patriarchy messes up the psychic of both people, of both genders, of both genders. But he goes to the material history. He doesn't negate that the psychology of it and the feelings of it and the individual behavior are not a problem, but he starts to go into where capitalism gets involved. And so this is kind of a Marxist analysis of it. He says in early hunter-gatherer and societies, there was no private property, there was no surplus, no accumulation. And in this context, women often played surprisingly prominent roles. He cites Lewis Henry Morgan's classic work of Iroquois, I believe. A society that deeply impressed Engels and where women held dominant roles in decision-making councils. But then, like, something shifted. With the development of agriculture and surplus production, with landed property, suddenly lineage mattered. Inheritance mattered. Control over labor mattered. And women, along with children, became part of what could be owned and controlled. This practice first began in in slavery inside the patriarchal family. It was enforced by men over women and children. The very first system of human bondage, let's think about this, wasn't between nations or races, it was inside the home, right? He says biological differences between men and women may make male dominance possible, right? But they don't make it inevitable. Not every adult abuses children, even though all adults are physically stronger, right? But the physical capacity is a necessary condition for abuse, but it's not a sufficient cause. This is what makes oppression persist. And then it says oppression isn't nature. People aren't inherently to oppress one another. It's that someone benefits from it. That's what makes it human nature, if you see what I mean. That's what makes it inevitable. But he also talks about exploitation, because people exploit other people because they get something from it, and it's advantageous to them. You get an advantage when you exploit someone else. Whether you're a plantation owner with enslaved workers or a feudal lord with serfs, there's a reason the relationship exists, and that reason is not psychological damage. It's not that these people are confused about their feelings. It's that they live very well off of the labor of others. Just like a landlord begging you for money every month. I'm not going to get in there. But Parenti pushes back hard on this idea that men are secretly harming themselves by being sexist. That they're losing out on a deeper, more fulfilling relationships. He says that maybe so nobody lives in the long run. People live here and now, right? But in the here and now, patriarchal dominance comes with real material privileges. With unpaid domestic labor, economic dependence, submission. These are not accidental features of gender oppression. They are the point of it. They are the point of gender oppression. And the men who have benefited from this arrangement across centuries have not been noticeably complaining about it. Sorry, I'm not editing that out. Something fell. The sun's kind of going down, so you're going to see like golden hour from me. But there is a conscious intention behind this. People say, "Are you posting a conspiracy?" Well, he says yes, and I also say yes. Not like a smoke-filled room conspiracy, but a conscious, ongoing active effort by those in power to maintain systems that serve them. It points to the law, to the police, to the legislators, to all the people sitting in Congress deliberately blocking protections for women. How do you think this patriarchy is maintained, or this hegemony? I think that's how you say it. We're going to look that up real quick. We're not editing this out. Hegemony is maintained. They are thinking just as hard about how to keep you in your place as you are thinking about how to get out of it, right? They just have a lot more resources. They have a lot more connections. But every system of oppression has one thing in common. It dresses itself up as a natural order of things. The feudal lord said the serf naturally belongs in his station. The Chinese landlord class had a saying that the sun cannot rise in the west, meaning you peasants cannot change your condition any more than you can change the movement of the sun. It's not injustice, it's just how things are, right? And patriarchy does this exact same thing. For centuries, women's subordination was justified through every cultural institution available: religion, philosophy, science, literature. Aristotle, 2,400 years ago, said the male is superior, the female inferior. The one governs and the other is governed. The Bible, Genesis, Timothy, filled with explicit commands for female submission and silence. And the 19th century science. Women are too emotional to vote, too physically frail for political life, too morally elevated to be contaminated by public affairs. These were presented as scientific conclusions, expert consensus. We point out that something there's something simple about all of this stuff. If women are naturally in a subordinate place, if it's just the way things are, then why are you so worried about it? I'm just gonna put it like that. Why the elaborate laws? Why the force? Why the constant reinforcement? The answer is obvious, because it is not natural at all. It's constructed. It's constructed things these constructed things require maintenance. But it gets layered with class and race and the limits of bourgeois feminism. And he talks of Abigail Adams, the famous letter to her husband, John Adams, urging that the new nation remember the ladies and not put unlimited power in the hands of the husbands. It's an amazing letter, a legitimate grievance. And John Adams responded by doing what Parenti says the privileged always do. He reversed the roles of the victim and the victimizer. He wrote back about suffering under the despotism of petticoat. He made himself the oppressed party. But then he turns it around. Parenti turns it around, because the same Abigail Adams, who so rightly argued for women's rights and wrote against Shays' rebellion in the 1787 uprising of poor farmers in western Massachusetts who were being crushed by debt and thrown in debtors' prisons, she called them ignorant, restless desperados. I don't know how to say it. Desperados. Y'all don't chill out on me. The communists are gonna get me. No, the liberals are gonna get me. I'm sorry. She called for the most vigorous measures to crush them. Abigail Adams also defended property against the people who had none. He makes the same observation about George Sand, the 19th century French novelist who smoked cigars, wore men's clothes, and demanded equality for women when the Paris Commune rose up and working class women were on the barricades fighting against class privilege. George Sand denounced these people, called them mob, showed them the bourgeois colors, the real bourgeois colors. The point isn't to dismiss these women or their contributors. The point is that their wearing pants is no guarantee of wisdom or fairness. That the fight for rights within a particular class boundary, while real and important, yes, is a limited fight. And when push comes to shove, class interests tend to win. A government report from 1911 stated it plainly. The low wages at which women will work are the chief reason for employing them at all. Her cheapness is her greatest economic asset to the employer. The moment she organizes and demands for better wages, she destroys what makes her valuable to him. This is not incidental to the system. This is the system. But there's a distinction that I want to make here, and it's about the commodification of women under capitalism. In a traditional patriarchal society, right, women were treated as property under men, or property of men under capitalism. They are treated as class commodities, which is a variation of the same thing, but taken to new heights nowadays and new standards. He traces how standards of beauties of cross cultures and across time have always reflected the dominant class. In parts of Africa, excessive body weight was the ideal because it represented a family's abundance, a class marker. In feudal China, foot binding transformed upper-class women into class commodities, who had neither capacity nor the feet nor the need to walk. It was a luxury. A luxury never available to the women, breaking their backs in the rice fields. In present-day American consumer culture, the prototype of beauty is blonde, slim, polished, a close approximation of the upper-class Anglo-Protestant ideal. And millions of women pursue this ideal through surgery, starvation diets, and obsessive self-modification, collaborating, as Parenti calls it, in their own repression. The stats that he cites in the video is that 80% of fourth grade girls in California had already been on their first diet. Teenage girls in Long Island were literally not growing because of the chronic dieting. 75% of young women believed themselves too fat, while 45% believe we're actually underweight. And 25% of North American women at the time of this lecture, which I believe was in 1990 something, suffer from anorexia. Anorexia? You know what I mean. But he knows that more people died from this anorexia in any given year than from AIDS. But it wasn't treated with that urgency because it didn't threaten men. You see what I'm saying here? But we're going to call it what it is, and I think I have a couple more. I'm not going to keep y'all too long. But this is male terrorism. This, because what I'm describing here is an occasional bad behavior. It's a massive systematic global pattern of violence against women that function as a tool of control. Rape, domestic violence, sexual harassment, trafficking, femicide. These are not random. These are not acts of few sick individuals who can't help themselves. They are as conscious acts by people who know exactly what they're doing and who are operating within a system that either tolerates or enables it. There's an analogy like the male batterer, right? When the police show up, sits calmly in the newspaper because he's not out of control. He sets his limits on his violence. He uses it strategically to produce compliance. This is not rage. This is method. There's methods to this madness. An estimated 12.1 million American women had been raped, and that number is significantly higher now. Every 3.5 minutes. And it's lower now. It's not even 3.5 minutes. It's probably 1 minute. A woman faced raped or attempted rape, only 1 in 6 rapes, and it's probably lower now, were reported. Of those, less than 40% resulted in arrest. And only 3% of those results resulted in conviction. You run a higher risk of going to jail for purse snatching than for rape. Because a purse is property. And under the system, property is protected more reliably than people. 4 women were murdered every day in the United States during this time by men that were intimate with them. 3 million women battered every year. And yet the government that launched military interventions overseas claiming to protect women could not or would not address the scale of violence happening on its own streets. But what does this all connect to? This is connecting to, and he argues that capitalism and sexism are not separate systems that happen to coexist. They are mutually reinforcing. They need each other. Capitalism rewards exploitation, accumulation, ruthless self-interest, and indifference to suffering. Those impulses make it highly functional for sexism and racism to exist because they divide the people who'd rather otherwise have any other reason to act together, right? Conservatives from like Aristotle to Madison and to Reagan and now Trump have always had a raging fear of what this is called leveling. An equal distribution of property, class equality, and that fear extends directly to racial and gender equality because greater equality for women and people of color means higher wages, which means lower profits. Every dollar more in your paycheck is $1 less in someone's investment portfolio. This is why the most persistent attacks on feminism have come from the most fervent defenders of capitalism. So, what does this all connect to? The argument is that capitalism and sexism are not separate systems. They happen to coexist with each other. They need each other to exist. Capitalism rewards exploitation, accumulation, ruthless self-interest, and indifference to suffering. Those impulses make it highly functional for sexism and racism to exist because they divide the people who would otherwise have every reason to act together. Conservatives from Aristotle to Madison to Reagan to now Trump have always had a raging fear of what is called leveling, an equal distribution of property, and that fear extends directly to racial and gender equality because greater equality for women and people of colors means higher wages, which means lower profits. Every dollar more in your paycheck is $1 less in someone's investment portfolio. This is why the most persistent attacks on feminism have come from the most fervent defenders of capitalism. It's not a coincidence, it's a logical relationship. And the socialist experiments of the 20th century, for all their contradictions and failures, showed something important. When you dramatically change class relations, conditions for women improve significantly. Education levels rise, professions opened, healthcare expanded, domestic labor was redistributed. These were real advances, imperfect, incomplete, but real. And when capitalism was restored in Eastern Europe after the fall of the Soviet Union, it was the women who were hit first and the hardest. 70% of newly unemployed in many of these countries were women. The free market did restore one thing for women immediately: the beauty pageant. Pornography and prostitution were all backed in a very big way. But a real man is nothing more and nothing less than a decent human being who believes in social justice, fair play, and human dignity. None of this is natural. None of this is inevitable. All of this serves someone's interests. And the first step toward changing it is being willing to look at it honestly, not as a collection of individual failures, but as a system, a structure, a political economy of oppression that has consciously built and consciously maintained. But the bar is not very high. and a lot of people are still failing to clear this bar. But this is Tristan Talks. Thank you. And we're tapped in. We're staying critical and we're paying attention. Thank you for watching. Peace.